Before we even start today, I just want to say to you, the listener, may your day be filled with grace, and may your entire week ahead be profoundly blessed and just full of light.
I love that. That's a beautiful way to start.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's fitting, right? Because honestly, the people at the center of today's deep dive, they needed every single ounce of grace they could possibly get.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they were a complete mess.
Seriously. Imagine pouring 18 months of your life into founding this tight-knit community, only to get word a few years later that they are proudly celebrating a scandal so vile that even the local corrupt politicians are disgusted.
Right. When most people approach ancient religious texts, they expect polite philosophical treatises written in quiet rooms.
Yeah, totally.
But the reality of this text is a chaotic, cosmopolitan mashup of factionalism, extreme behavior, and, aggressive social jockeying. Feels incredibly modern.
It really does. So today we are tearing into a text that proves ancient religion was anything but serene. We've got a massive stack of sources on the table today, right?
We do. We're looking at historical maps, geographical data, archaeological timelines, and, of course, theological documents.
Right, all detailing the first epistle to the Corinthians. And our mission today is to unpack the explosive historical context behind this letter.
And just to set the ground rules early on, we are acting as impartial guides here.
Exactly. We aren't taking theological sides. We just want to understand how a community in crisis navigates identity and why the mechanics of their failure are so deeply relevant to you right now.
Because it really is the ultimate case study in community collapse.
Okay, so before we can even look at the text itself, we have to map out the environment, right? This church was sitting right in the middle of ancient Corinth.
Yeah, and if you look at the geographical data, Corinth's placement is, well, it's practically unfair.
It is. It sits on this narrow isthmus connecting mainland Greece to the Peloponnese Peninsula, and it's flanked by two major ports, right? Lycium and Cenchreae.
Right, and that geography dictated its entire economy.
Yeah.
But sailing around the southern coast of the Peloponnese meant navigating Cape Malea.
Oh, which was notoriously dangerous.
Incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Violent storms, shipwrecks everywhere. I mean, ancient sailors literally had a proverb that said, "Let him who sails around Malea forget his home."
Wow. Basically a death sentence.
Exactly. So to bypass that death trap, Corinth utilized something called the diolkos.
Yes. I was looking at the archaeological notes on the Diolkos, and it is just fascinating. It's basically an ancient Panama Canal, but on land.
That is a great analogy, actually.
You're right, because it wasn't just like a dirt path. It was a 6-kilometer paved limestone track with these deep grooves carved into it.
Yeah, they would essentially pull massive cargo ships completely out of the water onto these wheeled wooden carts. They called them the olkos.
And then they'd have draft animals physically haul these loaded ships across the landmass to the other port. I mean, the sheer engineering is wild.
What's fascinating here is the toll revenue from the diolkos alone made Corinth outrageously wealthy. It functioned as a global funnel.
Just a constant stream of cash.
Exactly. You had this constant influx of sailors, merchants, goods, and capital flowing through the city streets every single day.
But, and the sources really point this out, this wasn't like ancient old money wealth.
Right. No, not at all.
Because the original Greek city of Corinth was completely annihilated by the Roman Republic in 146 BC. It just sat in ruins for a century.
Right, until Julius Caesar refounded it in 44 BC. He rebuilt it as a Roman colony.
And he didn't populate it with Roman elites, did he?
No, he specifically populated it with freedmen, retired soldiers, and former slaves.
So the cultural DNA of the city in the first century was fiercely nouveau riche, just highly ambitious people.
Yeah, and that is a crucial mechanism for understanding this letter. Caesar populated it with people who started at the bottom of the social ladder.
Right.
So Corinth became this city completely obsessed with upward mobility. It was a fierce meritocracy fueled by commerce.
So it boasts this Roman governmental and legal structure, but it retains this deeply Greek cultural soul. And a reputation for severe moral laxity. I mean, if we're comparing it to something today, it's like a chaotic mashup of Wall Street commerce and Las Vegas nightlife.
Oh, that's exactly what it was. You had the massive Temple of Aphrodite looming over the city on the Acrocorinth, which was this deep 575-meter mountain.
And then down in the Forum, you've got the Temple of Apollo.
Right. Plus, add in the Isthmian Games every 2 years.
Which were massive, right? Held for Poseidon.
Yeah, second only to the Olympics. They brought in thousands of athletes and tourists. The city was just wired for commercial success, status signaling, and, frankly, international pleasures.
A hyper-competitive environment.
Highly competitive. Even the philosophers and orders in Corinth operated like modern influencers. They charged massive fees for public speaking events.
Just teaching people the rhetorical tricks they needed to climb the social ladder.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this contradiction, though. If this city is this hyper-competitive, toxic, status-obsessed machine, why on earth does Paul choose to anchor himself there for 18 long months?
Right, doing his second missionary journey.
Yeah, I mean, that is a massive operational pivot for someone whose usual strategy was just constant movement. Why stay in Vegas?
Well, what's fascinating here is the logistics make it brilliant. Paul operated as a tent maker, or leather worker, meaning he worked right in the commercial marketplace.
Oh, so he's right in the mix of all the commerce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By planting a church at the crux of the deal goes, his message leveraged those massive shipping lanes.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, every converted merchant or traveler basically carried the theology to the far edges of the Roman Empire.
Wow, it was a viral incubator.
It really was.
So he starts working with Aquila and Priscilla, another couple of tent makers, and he preaches in the synagogue.
But he faces intense pushback there.
Right, so he pivots directly to the Gentiles. And it actually works. He builds this massive, diverse congregation.
He does. He even gets hauled before the Roman proconsul, Gallio.
And Gallio just throws the case out, right?
Yeah, which essentially gives this new movement a brief window of legal protection. On paper, it looks like a massive operational success.
Right, on paper. But because Corinth was such a melting pot, the church didn't exist in some pristine bubble.
No, it didn't.
The outward success was masking a deep structural rot. So fast forward to the spring of roughly 55 or 56 AD.
Right before Pentecost.
Exactly. Paul is stationed in Ephesus a few years after his initial stay in Corinth, and he assumes the Corinthian church is just thriving.
But instead, that toxic, ultra-competitive culture of the city hasn't just crept into the church. It has completely taken over the steering wheel.
And the inciting incident for this specific text isn't just one single event, right? It's a collision of terrible news.
It's a total mess.
Because first of all, the sources reveal that 1 Corinthians is not actually the first letter.
Right, it's technically 2 Corinthians.
Yeah, Paul had previously sent a letter, which is completely lost to history now, though he references it in chapter 5. He told them to separate from immoral people.
And they completely warped the instructions of that lost letter.
How so?
Well, they assumed Paul meant they should physically isolate themselves from the outside world, like non-believers, while completely ignoring the moral corruption happening inside their own ranks.
Oh, wow. Which brings us to the tipping point. Paul gets a visit from people belonging to Chloe's household, and they bring these alarming oral reports that the community is violently fracturing.
Yes, and simultaneously, the Corinthians mail Paul a letter of their own.
Oh, right. A letter with this massive laundry list of questions. I mean, they were basically treating Paul like a theological advice columnist.
They really were. They viewed him less as a founding apostolic authority and more as a consultant they could debate.
The irony is just wild. A church that expected to be seen as spiritually elite and mature was basically acting like a bunch of rebellious teenagers.
Exactly. And the reports from Chloe's household detailed this deep, aggressive factionalism.
People claiming different leaders, right?
Yes. They were splitting into groups claiming, I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos, or I follow Cephas.
They were treating these factions like rival political parties, prioritizing their own social climbing over the actual gospel.
Well, it goes even deeper than modern politics. This was the Roman clientela system, the patron-client relationship infiltrating the church.
Okay, wait, explain that a bit more.
So wealthy Corinthian believers were acting as patrons, right? And they were gathering lower status believers as their clients.
Oh, I see.
And they used their association with eloquent, charismatic teachers like Apollos as social capital to elevate their own status in the broader city.
Oh, wow. It's like modern tech entrepreneurs using the specific venture capital firm that backed them as a status symbol to flex on their rivals.
That's a perfect comparison.
The actual product, or in this case, the faith, becomes completely secondary to the prestige of the backer.
Exactly. And that status obsession naturally bled into some horrifying moral blindness.
Right, because before Paul even touches the letter they mailed him, he has to do massive damage control over these rumors. He spends the first 6 chapters just detonating their arrogance.
He really does. He confronts a specific case of incest, a man sleeping with his stepmother, which, by the way, even pagan Roman law explicitly outlawed.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. But the most shocking detail isn't just the act itself, it's the community's reaction. Paul points out they're proud of it.
They are boasting about it.
How does a community experience a profound religious transformation and then justify cheering for behavior that disgusted their pagan neighbors? How did they justify that?
The mechanism driving that justification was Greek dualism.
Okay, Greek dualism.
Yeah, it was a dominant philosophical concept in their culture that said the physical body matter itself was inherently inferior or even evil, while the spirit was pure and elevated.
Sort of the old Platonic idea that the body is just a tomb for the soul.
Exactly the concept. So the Corinthians synthesized this dualism with their new faith.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. They concluded that because their spirits were saved, the physical realm was irrelevant. They thought their spiritual status was so elite that physical actions like extreme sexual immorality couldn't tarnish their pure inner selves.
So they literally weaponized their theology to indulge in the absolute worst place of Corinthian culture.
They did.
And this dualism didn't just ruin their sexual ethics, it destroyed their social ethics too. Chapter 6 details believers dragging each other into pagan courts to settle lawsuits.
And we really have to look at the mechanics of the Roman legal system to understand the cruelty happening here.
Because they weren't fair courts, right?
Not at all. Roman courts were not designed to be blind or impartial. They explicitly favored the wealthy, the well-connected, and the rhetorically skilled.
Meaning this wasn't just two equals having a disagreement over a contract. This was wealthy Christian patrons deliberately utilizing a corrupt pagan system to defraud poorer Christians who had no legal recourse.
It was the ultimate betrayal of the community.
That's awful.
So Paul dismantles this by attacking their definition of wisdom. He contrasts their status-obsessed philosophical posturing with what he calls the foolishness of the cross.
Which would have been deeply offensive to them, honestly. Crucifixion wasn't just a method of execution. It was a carefully engineered system of public humiliation designed to strip a person of all status.
Yes, completely.
By grounding their faith in a crucified Savior, Paul is telling them their entire social pyramid is completely inverted.
And he permanently links their physical behavior to their spiritual reality. He introduces the concept that their bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit.
Right. You were bought with a price.
Exactly. If the spirit resides in the physical body, then dualism is a lie. The physical body has immense value, and exploiting others or indulging in corruption is a direct violation of that temple.
Wow. And that structural reality forces a massive pivot in the text. Once Paul thoroughly dresses them down over the rumors, he finally pulls out the letter they mailed him.
Right. He shifts to pastoral instruction.
And we see this distinct structural marker in the text. He keeps repeating the Greek phrase, peride, which means now concerning, or with regard to.
It functions almost like a bulleted list answering their mail.
Right. Now concerning marriage and divorce, now concerning virgins, now concerning the collection for Jerusalem.
He systematically addresses public worship, women's head coverings, abuses of the Lord's Supper, spiritual gifts.
I want to look closely at one specific topic in chapter 8 where he addresses food sacrifice to idols, because to a modern reader that sounds so niche.
It does.
But it's really like navigating modern ethical consumerism, right? Like, do you boycott a great product because the parent company does something you deeply disagree with?
That's a great way to frame it.
The sources show how deeply integrated the meat market was with the pagan temples in Corinth. How did he tell them to navigate that everyday life?
Well, what's fascinating here is that meat was relatively rare and expensive, and the primary place to purchase it was the Macellum, the meat market.
Which was often physically connected to the pagan temples, right?
Exactly. The meat had already been ritually sacrificed to gods like Apollo or Poseidon before it ever hit the market to be sold.
And even more intensely, the temples basically functioned as the ancient equivalent of corporate dining rooms.
Oh, completely.
If a wealthy Corinthian wanted to close a business deal or maintain their social standing, they attended banquets in those temple dining halls.
Right. And the Corinthians write to Paul and basically argue, hey, we have superior knowledge. We know Apollo doesn't actually exist.
Right. So eating this meat, even sitting inside the temple, means absolutely nothing. It's just protein.
And Paul actually validates their underlying theology. An idol is indeed nothing in reality, but he completely rejects their application of that knowledge.
Oh, interesting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, he introduces a new governing metric for all behavior. The conscience of the weaker brother and the edification of the community.
And by edification, you mean the structural building up of the group, right?
Exactly. His logic works like this. You, the wealthy patron, might possess the intellectual knowledge that the temple means nothing.
Okay.
But consider a newer believer who just spent 40 years enslaved to the cult of Apollo. For them, that temple represents real spiritual darkness.
Right. The trauma of that is still real for them.
Yes. So if they see you, a respected leader in the church networking and eating at the idol's feast, their fragile conscience might be emboldened to return to actual pagan worship.
So your intellectual freedom just triggered a spiritual relapse in someone else.
Exactly.
You might have the right to do something, you might be technically correct in your theology, but you are morally bankrupt because you prioritize your social networking over their spiritual survival.
As Paul says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. And this is the exact metric he uses to correct their chaotic public worship in the later chapters too.
Oh, with the spiritual gifts.
Right. The Corinthians were treating spiritual gifts like speaking in tongues or prophesying as personal status symbols.
I read that they were mimicking the ecstatic, frenzied utterances of the Oracle of Delphi to prove they were top-tier spiritual elites.
Yeah.
They were turning their gatherings into a loud, competitive mess where everyone was just shouting over each other to show off.
Which is why Paul interjects chapter 13, the famous love chapter, right into the middle of this correction.
Wait, really? We always hear that chapter at weddings.
Right, but in context, it is a brutal rebuke.
Oh, wow.
He tells them that if they speak with the tongues of angels but lack self-sacrificial love, they're just a clanging cymbal. The spiritual gifts are tools meant to serve the community, not badges of individual honor.
That reframes that chapter entirely. And this Greek dualism didn't just ruin their ethics and their worship, it poisoned their ultimate theology. Which brings us to the absolute climax of the letter, chapter 15.
Yes, this is where it all lands.
All of Paul's ethical rules regarding the body culminate in one massive theological reality. The way they behave in their bodies today is directly tied to what happens to their bodies in the future.
The bodily resurrection. Some factions in Corinth were actively denying that there would be a future resurrection of the dead for believers.
Because, again, if you buy into the Greek idea that the physical body is just a nasty tomb you are trying to escape, why on earth would you want it back for eternity?
Exactly. The concept of a resurrected physical body sounded repulsive to them.
So what does this all mean for Paul's argument?
Well, Paul dedicates an enormous amount of rhetorical energy to dismantle this denial because it is the absolute linchpin of the entire Christian framework.
Right.
He argues that if the dead are not raised, then Christ was not raised. And if Christ was not raised, their faith is entirely useless.
The logic is airtight. God created the physical world and called it good. The resurrection proves that God intends to redeem the physical world, not just abandon it.
Yes, and by proving the future bodily resurrection, Paul destroys the very foundation of their arrogance.
How so?
Well, if the physical body is destined for eternal resurrection, then what you do with it today has infinite significance.
Oh, I see.
Your sexuality, your financial dealings, what you eat, and how you treat the marginalized, they are all deeply spiritual acts because the physical and the spiritual are completely inseparable.
It completely dictates their physical reality right now. He takes them from this fractured, status-obsessed, dualistic mentality, and he grounds them in a unifying hope.
A hope that demands they live entirely differently from the brutal culture of Corinth.
They are called to exercise self-sacrificial love in a city engineered for self-promotion.
Which is an incredibly difficult mandate.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the chaotic streets of ancient Corinth, we've talked so much about the practical value here, right?
Yeah, living faithfully, prioritizing unity, exercising love in a complex world.
Right. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a completely different angle to mull over on your own. We look at Corinth as a historical warning about the dangers of extreme cultural assimilation, right? We spent all this time reading Paul's side of the conversation, his corrections, his shock at their behavior.
Yeah, we only have his half of the correspondence.
But imagine, just for a second, holding the original lost letter that the Corinthians mailed to Paul.
Wow.
How much of our own modern, everyday cultural assumptions might look just as absurd, chaotic, or arrogant if they were viewed through that same ancient, unvarnished lens?
That is a profound thought to end on.
We'll leave you to think on that. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. God blesses all the listeners, and we will see you on the next deep dive.